Good morning, everybody. Oh no, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I was just saying whilst I was on mute that I'm feeling very homesick hearing all these Aussie accents, and I was looking at, she's gone, but Matilda, there you are, had a gorgeous picture on the wall behind her, and it made me realise I haven't seen those flowers for 2 years. So, but I got a ticket home for Christmas, so I'm flying back into Australia on the 17th of December, and I'm a bit excited. So thank you. Yeah. So flying into Melbourne after 2 years, so my kids are in Australia. It will be a little bit exciting going to the airport. So a little bit about myself. My name is Kate. I'm kind of a Melbourne girl if I'm considered Australian. I'm actually English born and bred, and went backpacking to Australia when I was in my early 20s. Met an Australian and then didn't go home. So I have 2 grown-up Australian kids, probably older than some of you. One's 27 and she's a physio up in Brisbane. So anyone's up in Brisbane, she works at Charlie's in cardiothoracics. And I have a son who is back at uni doing a master's in architecture, and he's at Monash, so Melbourne. So that's nice. So that's me. So I'm a nurse. I did my training in Australia. I went to the Catholic uni and then UNE up in Lismore. Worked all around Australia. My husband was in the army, so we moved every year, and I worked all around Australia and then overseas as well. And came to Australia. No, I didn't. I came to Saudi Arabia for a year or maybe 2 back in 2015, and 7 years later, I'm still here. So it's a crazy country. It can be really rewarding. It can be very frustrating. And I always say, much to the worry of the agents, my job is to actually talk you out of coming rather than talk you into coming. So I'll tell you warts and all. I'll tell you the good, the bad, the ugly, so that you can make an informed decision about whether or not you'd like to consider joining us here in Saudi. And the reason I do that, it's a big commitment for you to leave home. Even if you're only coming for a year, there's still so much that you have to do to get here, that I would hate you to think that you're coming to something that isn't an accurate picture. Okay. So the other thing I would say is that obviously the world is still very kind of dynamic with what's happening with COVID at the moment. So travel is still somewhat, particularly for you guys, I know, particularly down in Victoria, it's been very restricted where you have been and what you've been able to do. Normally we're able to travel freely, and the Middle East is just the most amazing part of the world to be, because we can go everywhere very, very easily. But of course, at the moment, although things are opening up again, we have been restricted as well for the last 2 years. So if I'm a little bit cagey about travel and taking leave and those sorts of things, please bear in mind that I'm talking after having been through the last 2 years. Okay, so I know Maddie said save your questions to the end. However, I would say I'm very happy to answer questions as we go through. If something pops into your head, you're welcome to just turn your mic on and speak up. If you prefer, just raise your hand. There's a little hand function with a smiley face towards the top of your screen. And if you tap on that, it will raise your hand, and so I can see that you're wanting to ask a question. Otherwise, I'll try to keep it to an hour, because I know that time is precious, but I'm happy to stay online as long as questions are being asked. So with that, I'm happy to jump into it unless anybody has any questions at this point in time. No, happy to go ahead. It's really funny, there's a real Australian look, and it's so nice to see everybody's faces. Wherever you go around the world, there's a certain look of different people, and I can't put my finger on it what it is, but definitely look like an Australian group today. So very nice to meet you all. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you can all see my screen. Is that visible to everybody? I can't see your faces anymore, so hopefully it is.
Yeah, we can see the screen.
All right, fantastic. So where am I? I'm actually sitting at the King Faisal Specialist Hospital and Research Centre in Riyadh. We're in the capital of Saudi Arabia, the main city. and my screen won't go on. Okay, and where is Saudi Arabia? For those of you who don't know, it's this huge country here, bright yellow, kind of in the middle of the world, particularly if you're traveling from Australia up to Europe or even over to America. We really are very centrally located. So normally in a normal world, it just means there's great opportunities to get all over the place. And one of the reasons why I originally came to Saudi was because my parents are elderly and in the UK. And my husband was working in London, and my kids, as I mentioned earlier, are in Australia. So I was literally in the middle and could go either way, and that kind of worked. Saudi is a huge country, but it has quite a small population for its size. So about 31.5 million, and Riyadh itself is a big city, so about 6.5 million. It's very, very multicultural. So not necessarily you're not going to see churches here, you're not going to see synagogues or anything other than a mosque when I say multicultural, but you will see staff from people from all around the world working here. And at the hospital, I think we have over 32 different nationalities in nursing affairs alone. So nurses from 32 different countries means obviously we see the same thing being done different ways, or 32 different ways. I came here a control freak. I came here a perfectionist. And I realized very quickly that those were things that will be difficult for you here, because you do have to be adaptable and flexible more than anything else. And if you choose to go on and be interviewed, one of the most important things is not necessarily what you know or don't know, but the type of person you are, how adaptable and flexible you are, because you will have to work with people, as I said, from so many different countries. And because of that, it's more about just the type of person you are. If you don't know something, we can teach you it. If you know something we don't know, we'd love you to share that with us. But it really is about your personality more than what you know. So that's just something, oh, that's interesting. Saudi was quite strange. So the borders were locked. They locked very early. They locked in March, I think March the 13th in 2000 and, was it 2020? Yeah, it must have been.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, we had very little notice. I think we found out on the Thursday that the borders would be closed from 2 o'clock on the Monday. If you didn't get back, you got locked out, and you were locked out for, many of my colleagues were locked out for 6 months. And everybody else got locked in. So we weren't going anywhere. But as a result of that, COVID really hasn't been too bad here. So the most we had in hospitalizations, and we're a 1,000-bed hospital, the most we really ever had at one time was maybe 70 patients with COVID, with very, very low deaths in the hospital and as a country. I'm sure it was a little bit underreported. But it has been interesting the way that the country has dealt with COVID. So we all, it's mandated that we have to be vaccinated, double vaccinated to work, to go into any public building. So if you are not vaccinated, you wouldn't be able to enter the country. And in addition to that, if you were here already and you're not doubly vaccinated, you can't go anywhere. You can't go into a shop, you can't go into a building, you can't go into a restaurant, certainly can't go into work. So we're now on our 3rd round of vaccines. We're on to boosters. There's been a really good uptake, simply because if you're not vaccinated, as I said, you're very limited in what you're able to do. So back to the presentation, and thank you for just letting me step away for a second. I do apologise about that. I was saying that Riyadh is a big city, about 6.5 million, and the country in its entirety has about 1/3 of the population are expatriates. So expatriate workers from any number of countries, and that's reflected here in the hospital as well. That's going slow again. So, strange question, but one of the things I want you to think about over the next wee while is, how much did you actually save last year? Strange thing, as I say, to put up, but the reason for asking is, most people, particularly at this point in time, you might be desperate to get out of Australia or New Zealand, But one of the things coming to Saudi, if we're realistic and honest, is that most people come to save a little bit of money. So when we get to the salaries a little bit later on, I'll warn you, they may be not even as much as you're earning now. But my question to you is, how much did you save last year? And I want you to base that on, if you were just looking at your full-time salary of your, your main job, and you didn't count in any overtime or working agency, shifts at the weekends, etc., how much were you actually able to save during that year? Normally when I ask this question, and if I'm in a room of people, I say, okay, who saved $20,000 last year? And people just stare at me or laugh. And then we work backwards from there. So a show of hands would be great. Did anyone manage to save $20,000 last year, whether it's New Zealand or Australian? Any hands up? Oh, Matilda. Is that just from your full-time job? Matilda, you're muted again. Was that just from your full-time job, Matilda?
I was in Saudi in 2020 last year.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, then
so I can attest.
Okay, and Matilda's actually going to be, I need you to, I want you to speak up today, Matilda. I want you to keep me honest. So if you think that I'm saying something that is not true, I really want you to speak up. I don't know Matilda, I haven't met Matilda before, don't know where you worked, but it's really, really powerful for everybody else that's here to have somebody who's actually been here and worked here to go, oh yeah, no, she is telling the truth, she's not making it up. So nobody else put their hand up. Peter and Esther put their hands up. Was that because you managed to save money last year? Peter?
For me, it was in remote. So working in remote Australia throughout COVID, we weren't allowed to go anywhere.
Yeah, okay. And what about you, Esther?
No, I just raised my hand because I don't know where to write. You said we need to write our full names.
Your names come up, so I think we're probably okay for now. But if not, Maddie or one of the girls will get in contact with you.
Okay, I thought you wanted name and surname. All right.
They did, but I think because we can see Esther, it's okay. Some people are completely anonymous, so that's why they would have asked. Okay, so nobody said. Sorry?
I've got your name, Esther. All good.
Okay, fantastic. So
Okay,
Grace's got your name. Did anyone manage to save 10,000 last year? We're going backwards in an auction here. Anyone save 10,000? Okay, so we'll stop there. Normally, the response is that no, of course we didn't manage to save any money. It's expensive to live where we live, and we spend a lot of our money on our mortgage or our rent, and then gas and electricity, telephone, internet, cars, car insurance, car registration, house contents insurance, council rates, etc., etc., etc. So we're left with no money, and if we do, it's certainly not $5,000, $10,000, or $20,000 a year. So having said that, you can forget about that now. We will come back to it later, but just sort of keep that in the back of your mind. Or if you know how much you saved last year, maybe put that down on a piece of paper. So back to King Faisal. So this is actually a picture that was taken a couple of years ago. It doesn't look real, but I promise you it is. And it shows part of the hospital. The hospital is huge. It covers a vast piece of land, and this is maybe 1/8 of the total land that the hospital occupies. The building that you can see is the newest part of the building, called the King Abdullah Centre for Oncology and Liver Disease. So kind of self-explanatory what's in that building. And then the rest of the hospital kind of spreads down to the left, and then sort of down to the bottom of the screen. So the other things to note are, whilst this building is new, not all of the hospital is new. So most of it's probably 30 to 40 years old. It's constantly sort of going through updating and upgrading. And the other things that you can see on the picture are some of our female accommodation. So you can see the honeycomb building down to the bottom right, and then just behind the big high rise, there's more sort of sandy coloured apartments. That's our female accommodation. So all female staff, when they first arrived, and for as long as you want, are housed on site, and you would be housed in these accommodation blocks. For Peter, and I think there was another gentleman who joined us as well, Housing is currently, for males, is currently off-site, but from next month it will be temporary accommodation provided on-site and just kind of off to the left of the screen, away from the girls, because we don't trust you. And but lots of male nurses only get temporary accommodation, so it'll only be provided for a short period of time when you arrive, and then you need to take advantage of the housing allowance, and you can rent accommodation close by. It's actually not difficult to do at all. You actually can make a little bit of money from the housing allowance. And female nurses can also take the housing allowance if they would like to. But what I would say is don't plan on doing that until you've been here for a while and got used to the city, because life is a whole lot easier to begin with if you're living on site. So in addition to the main hospital, which is about 1,000 beds, we also have a small children's paediatric hematology oncology centre, which is about a half-an-hour drive away. It's a gorgeous little hospital, very sort of self-contained, and it's just got a really lovely feeling out there, but it is quite separated from the main hospital. It has about 60 beds. And then we have two other locations, one in Jeddah and one in Medina. Medina is officially opening next week. And so they're two of our other hospitals. Jeddah is undergoing a big mega project. So it will be about the same size as Riyadh when that is completed, but we don't have a final completion date yet. So here in Riyadh, we have about 12,000 staff working at the main site of the hospital. Within nursing affairs, we have about 3,500, and nearly about 2,800 of those are staff nurses. So I'm thinking back to time when I was last in Australia. If you're looking at the Division 1 and Division 2 nurses, the vast majority would be the Div 1 nurse, so fully licensed and able to work at the highest level of a staff nurse. And then in addition to that, we have care assistants who have historically been Filipino nurses who are not licensed because they've not managed to pass their licensing exam in their home country, but they've done their 3 or 4 year degree. So they've historically been our care assistants. We're now starting to use Saudi nationals for those positions, and they will be called patient care technicians. So that they basically work more like the hospital, I'm trying to think what we call them in Australia. Not licensed nursing aides. What are they called? PCAs? Can't think.
AIN?
AIN.
Yeah, assistants in nursing. Yeah, absolutely. So they are licensed with our licensing board, but they are not a nurse. And we'll start to use those more in our clinics over the next few years. So as I said earlier, very, very multicultural workforce. That information is wrong on the right-hand side. Saudi nurses make up about 30% of our workforce. That is correct. Male nurses make up about 18%. That is correct. Western staff nurses, at the moment, we're down to about 15%. So we did get up close to 30% prior to COVID. But what's happened over the last sort of year and a half, 2 years, is as staff have left, we haven't been able to get new staff in, mainly because the borders were closed, but also particularly in Australia and New Zealand, you have to put the prometric exam to be able to come and join us in Saudi, and those licensing centres were closed for a long time. So it delayed everything and made everything very difficult for Western nurses to join us. So we're starting to build that up again. We're ramping up our Western recruitment. It's kind of important because it is nice, it's reassuring to see other nurses that kind of have gone through the same training as you. And we find that a lot of nurses want to join us from other hospitals here in the Kingdom because they know we have more Western nurses in King Faisal. Matilda, where did you work when you were here, if you don't mind me asking?
I worked in Jeddah.
Okay. And did you have many Western nurses over there?
Not many.
Yeah, not many.
Not many.
I mean, it does make a difference. It's nice just to be able to, you know, just have that knowing look of, and it's reassuring for you as well to know that there's other Western nurses here. So we probably have more Western nurses than any other hospital in the Kingdom. but not as many as we would like. So if you have any friends that are interested in coming with you, please make sure you spread the word. Okay, so gosh, my screen is just taking ages to update. Okay, so we are magnet accredited. So I think there are a few magnet hospitals now in Australia. Magnet, though, is very American-centric, and it's awarded by the American Nurses Credentialing Centre, and it's awarded to hospitals that go through quite a long process to show that they are worthy of the accreditation. And they're measured against a set of criteria that are designed to measure the strength and quality of the nursing care that is provided. So it's meant to promote excellence in nursing practice and patient care. And the whole thing about Magnet is that if you can, you should be able to attract and retain the best nurses, much like a magnet pulls people in. So we are measured on nursing-centric benchmarks. They're listed here. But we have some really weird kind of anomalies. So, for example, we often have a high instance of falls. And obviously that's not good. If we're measured against international hospitals, we probably have a higher instance of falls, and yet our patients have sitters. So when I say our patients have sitters, I literally mean that every single patient that comes into the hospital has someone sit with them for their entire stay. And it's typically a family member, but it may be a paid sitter if a family member is not available. So the strange thing is, well, if you've got someone with your patients all the time, how are they falling? But they're falling because they go through ablutions before they pray. So even though we're a Muslim hospital in a Muslim country, where do they wash? They wash in a hand basin. How do you wash your feet? You lift your feet into the hand basin, which obviously is fraught with danger. So we kind of have these weird things about it. To me, it's like, well, we're a hospital in a Muslim country. Why haven't we got foot basins down on the ground? We don't, and now they're starting to retrofit them. But you'd think that would be a basic thing, right? That to prevent falls, you would do that. So even though every patient has someone with them at all times, so they should never be getting up and feeling wobbly because someone should be with them and pushing the call bell, or helping them get to the bathroom. When they get to the bathroom, because they're washing their feet in the hand basins and they're unwell because they're in hospital, they slip and fall. So we have these really weird anomalies, and that's just, as I said, kind of part of life in Saudi Arabia, is things that you wouldn't expect, and that can be challenging, but also can be very, if you can get your head around it, it can be very rewarding. So I'll just go through some more pictures quickly, just to give you an idea. Not all of the hospital is like this. So this is the newer part of the hospital, but as you can see, it's very bright and light and newly designed. This is part of our chemo suite. So we have about 100 bed or 100 chair day chemo unit. This is over in Cape Cod as well. This is the newer theatres that do all of the liver and organ transplants. They use lots and lots of robots. So there's no, the equipment is definitely there and available. We're not held back by a lack of finances. But the thing about Saudi is it kind of thinks that it's a first world country. Well, it absolutely thinks it's a first world country, but really, I think it's a second or a third world country with a gold veneer. So everything's shiny and marble and beautiful, but you scratch the surface and we're still really a third world country, or maybe a second world country. And that's not a criticism at all, but it does, please don't come and expect that everything is going to be shiny and gold and new. You can go to these skyscrapers that you'll see here. These are often shopping malls and restaurants and cafes. And when you're inside, you could be anywhere in the world. That it's all gold and glass and shiny and marble. But you go out of the building and you go onto the street behind the mall, and you could be in Calcutta. It's very, very. I love that, because I love the fact, I'm not a shopper really, but I love the fact that it's interesting and it's not. If you were in the big tower that you can see, if you were dropped there and told to open your eyes, you could be in Chadstone. but you go out of the building and you're certainly not in Chadstone. You are in the Middle East. And to put that into context, back in the 50s and 60s, the country was still largely Bedouin. So they were still living this wonderful Bedouin lifestyle. They were, you know, they didn't have big houses. Very few buildings will be older than that. And the buildings that they do have were beautiful mud and sand buildings. But unfortunately, you know, that they don't last forever. And so it makes it a very, very interesting country. So moving on to, if you decide that you do want to come and join us, everything has had to be a little bit adapted over the last few years because we can't continue to meet in big groups as we used to, but we're hoping to get back to that over the next few months. So we're hoping in 2022, we'll go back to once or twice monthly GNOs. That's our general nursing orientation. And we will ask for you to travel for those particular dates. For the last 2 years, people have just arrived when they've been able to get a flight. So it's meant that we've had people arriving kind of every day, but only 1 or 2 at a time. Whereas if you arrive in a group and there's maybe 15 or 20 of you arrive in that group, it's fantastic because you've got a little support group immediately. And that group you'll be friends with forevermore because you'll go through the highs and lows of arriving in this new country and going through the experience with other people. Matilda, are you still in touch with people that you did your orientation with?
Yeah, I am actually. And I met my partner in Saudi. So he's still there in Riyadh.
But, oh, he works in our emergency department. I've just remembered. So I really don't know Matilda, but I saw a message about, yeah, so that's another thing that's really weird about Saudi, the amount of people that come over and meet their future partners. So we go to lots of really amazing weddings when we're not in COVID around the world. I think one of the best, I can see that Sylvia's on with us, and one of the best was one of our clinical instructors who was Irish with amazing red hair, and she met someone from Brazil, I think, and they had this incredible wedding. And you just think, oh my goodness, imagine those little babies that come along that are kind of, you meet really great relationships can form here. So anyway, going back to GNO, General Nursing Orientation, the group that you arrive with will be friends forevermore because it's super. Hi, Sylvia. Sylvia, I think, is here in Saudi. So
Okay.
Saudi. Hi, Sylvia. So you can keep me honest as well if you think I'm saying anything that's not quite true. So,
actually, Kate, I saw the invitation and I thought I'll listen in for a few minutes, and I need to go now. But I just wanted to say to the group, I came to Saudi for a 2-year contract. That was in the year 1999. I'm still here. The time I had at King Faisal Hospital was just brilliant. It really is one of the best hospitals in the world, and it's a super place. I've now retired from nursing, but I met my partner here in Saudi, and we are together here in Saudi.
I know him, and he is delightful.
Thank you. And, you know, Kate and I lived almost opposite each other, and we used to walk every day, and what we talked about on our walk to work was travel. And that's one thing that hasn't been mentioned. I'm sure Kate will be mentioning it, but you can travel so much. I have seen so much of the world since I've lived here, and I've saved a lot of money. I've helped my son in New Zealand to build his house and his business. I've sent money for my daughter for a house. And she's in Europe and things are really expensive there. You can save a lot of money when you're living in Saudi and working in Saudi. And I just want to say good luck to all of you. I hope you come over. It really is a brilliant experience. And you may not stay 20-something years, but whatever time you do stay, you'll absolutely enjoy it. And have a great day, people. I am going now.
Thanks, Sylvia. Lovely to see you.
Bye-bye then.
Take care. Bye-bye. So it's quite funny, when I first met Sylvia, I was reading a book, A Year in Provence, and I don't know if you've ever read it, but it's a lovely book of two people that moved from England to the south of France. And I said to her, one day I want to end up in the south of France, and I want to buy a little old rundown place and do it up. And I think I might go to Saudi, because that might mean that I can afford to buy some sort of ramshackle place in the south of France. And I still have a little book, A Year in Provence, where that Sylvia sent it to me, and she said, follow your dreams, and I came to Saudi. So it was very strange that I saw Sylvia's name. That was why I jumped off to begin with, because I thought, why is Sylvia on here? But anyway, so it was nice that she joined us for those few minutes. I've seen a couple of questions. So dating in Saudi, does it happen? Absolutely. There is loads of dating that happens in Saudi. We just don't be public about it. So a lot of this, I'll talk about the social life a little bit later. I know I'm going to definitely go over an hour, so I'll try to go through some screens quite quickly. But absolutely, there's a very, very active social life. And there was another comment that I saw that women are, what did I say? Women are, I don't know if the comment is still there. But what I would say, interesting you say that, I assume dating would be difficult in a Muslim culture. Okay, yep, we'll come back to that. And you talk about freedom of movement. Women don't move freely. Absolutely, we move freely. So I often hire a car at the weekend. I drive all over the place. I go out camping in the desert. I even go camping by myself, because it's such an amazing country, and huge respect for women here. A lot of the things that we think about women are being treated poorly it's the opposite. So the way I often describe it is, when you were younger and you were out walking down the road with your dad, and your dad held your hand, he always put you on the inside, didn't he? And he was on the outside next to the cars. And where did that come from? It came from the fact that in the old days, they had their sword arm free so that they could defend you if they needed to. And in many, many respects, when men walk before women, it's just to make sure that they're, that they're kind of clearing the way. I've never, ever, ever in the 7 years that I've been here felt worried or threatened, or it's just not at all what you would imagine. And you'll find that, hate to say it, but particularly as Westerners, you'll be treated really, really well. Matilda, you've got your hand up. Are you going to disagree with me?
No, not at all. I wanted to reiterate that point, because it was something that I was nervous about before I went to Saudi. And I just wanted to say the same thing, that I think it's definitely something that we maybe blow up a bit more outside of the Middle East and Islamic culture, but I never once felt unsafe while I was there as a woman.
Yeah. And in fact, so much so that if you're walking down the corridor, I walk really fast. I'm a notoriously fast walker. So I walk around a corner and I kind of cut a corner. But people here will walk wide around corners, because they won't want to walk around the corner and bump into you and invade your space. If you get into a lift, people step back, and they don't want you to feel that they are possibly encroaching on your space. So it's almost the opposite of what you think it will be. Plus, we always hear negative stuff, right? So we always hear negative stuff in life, because that's what people talk about. We very rarely do we stop and say that something's really good and the opposite to the way that we thought it was going to be. So I think that as females here, you're treated with nothing but respect. It's not easy, for sure, and particularly I will be honest and say the nursing profession is not held in the same regard as it is in other countries around the world, like Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Ireland, and perhaps the Americas. But that is changing. That is a cultural shift. And now, because the young Saudis are going into nursing themselves, obviously that's changing as well. I keep getting distracted. I'm going to try and get back to the presentation, so I do apologise. So when you first arrive, we'll put you into an orientation. And the first couple of days when you arrive, we have to do all the stuff like getting you swabbed and making sure that your apps are going to allow you to come into work. We also do 2 days worth of kind of classroom stuff that will hopefully be reinstated by the time that you join us. And we look at these things that are listed here. So they're just kind of, at the moment, they're online sessions, but hopefully we'll be able to go back into being in person. We then go into orientation, which is in your unit. So you'll go into the unit where you'll be working. You'll be working with a clinical instructor, and between 5 and 11 days, you'll actually start to do your nursing competencies and check-offs. So again, nothing really unusual to be aware of. Probably a thing that catches most Australian and New Zealand nurses is that you do have to do a physical assessment of each patient when you take handover. So if you'll certainly be given the information on how to do that, and it's not rocket science at all. But do be aware that when you do a handover for your patients, you do need to do the sort of toes to the head physical assessment and include that in your handover. We also use integrated computer systems, so all the notes were supposed to be paperless. So that system is called ICIS, unfortunate name, but it is ICIS. And Pyxis, so we use the big, the automated medication systems, which I'm sure you've got in Australia as well. They do a lot of point of contact testing, check-offs in the first few days, and each unit has a clinical instructor. So you will be going through and doing all of those competencies and check-offs with the clinical instructor in the unit. If you're joining us as a locum, we kind of need to cram it into a shorter space of time, because obviously you're only going to be with us for 3 months. And so we don't want you taking a month to do all the orientation and then you're only able to actually work for the 2 months. So we do an abridged version of GNO, and we're certainly happy to consider people for locums. But the one thing I would say about locums is you kind of do all the hard work and then you leave. So you do all the trying to get used to where everything is. And I know what it's like. I used to do agency work. So each time you went for a shift at a new hospital, you had to find where everything is and try and work out how everything worked. Magnify that by 10 times when you come into the Middle East. You do all of that work, you just get used to finding your way around. And then if you come on a locum contract, you're leaving. So yeah, if you want to just come and sort of try it out, then not a bad idea. The biggest downside, though, is that you cannot leave the country whilst you're on a locum visa, because you get one visa to come in and that you can work on it for that time, and then the same visa you need to you exit on. So you're not able to come and go and see other parts of the world whilst you're on a locum visa. As I said, when you're doing your orientation, you'll have the clinical instructor and a preceptor. So once you finish your clinical check-offs, you then work with a preceptor for between 7 and 11 shifts. You're buddied up, so you're not left independently until you feel quite safe to do so. We work 44 hours a week, so it's longer than Australia and New Zealand, but we do 12-hour shifts. And you work in either Team A or Team B. So once you're in a team, you stay in that team. If you're traveling with a friend or you have friends here, you may want to ask to be in the same team, because you'll always work out opposite shifts otherwise. So if you do have someone here who's already working and you let us know what team you're in, we'll certainly ask the head nurse if it's at all possible to get you onto the same team. You also need to be prepared to work nights and days. Can't guarantee that you will never have to work nights, but of course there are some strange night owl people who like to work night duty, and that's great. I used to hate them. But you do need to be prepared to work nights and days. And we work 22 shifts in each 6 weeks. So that the shift pattern, if you look over to the right-hand side of the screen, if you're in Team A, you would do 12-hour shifts on each of these days. So week 1, you'd do Sunday, Monday, have Tuesday, Wednesday off, work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, have Sunday, Monday off, work Tuesday, Wednesday, then have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then start again. So it's a 2-week rolling roster. And if you're in Team B, you work the opposite shifts. So there's 4 shifts in basically in a week. There's Team A nights, Team A days, and then Team B nights and days. We typically have overtime available. It's paid at time and a half. That is definitely an issue with the payment of overtime at the moment, so I don't want to tell you something that's not true. You will get paid your overtime, without doubt. You'll get paid overtime, but it's paid externally. It's paid by the government Department of Finance. So at the end of each month, we collate everything, we send it off, they have to audit it, and then they release the money, and then it comes back to the hospital. So there is a delay in working overtime. But the one thing the hospital does do, if it owes you money, you get the money, but sometimes you have to wait quite a while to get it. So your salary is always paid. That's always paid on time. There's never any issues with your salary being paid, but I do want to warn you that at the moment, overtime is delayed in being paid. That may be resolved by the time you get here, but one of the reasons for kind of telling you about it now is if you have friends or colleagues, or you're on a chat group with people and they're saying, oh, we don't pay overtime, just want to reassure you, we do pay overtime. It's just it's delayed in payment at the moment. So the weekend is Friday and Saturday. I still, after nearly 7 years, can't get my head around that. I still think that Sunday is the end of the week and Monday's the first day, and you'll still count Wednesday as the middle of the week, and it's not, it's nearly the end of the week. So it's really weird, but Friday and Saturday is the weekend. Friday's the more, the quieter day, it's kind of the holy day, it's Sunday, and Saturday's the day when you'll see people out and about a bit more. I have put on NB leave because we have people arrive and then suddenly tell us that they need to take Christmas off and a particular date off, and they've only just joined, and we're kind of going, not sure where you get that idea from, because at home, if you're the last in, you're certainly not going to be getting Christmas that year. But people tend to arrive and forget that, and so I do want to warn you that whilst we have probably 50% of our workforce are Muslim, the other 50% are not, and we have a very large Catholic population from our Filipino and Indian nurses, so there's quite a bit of pressure for Christmas, and you won't always get Christmas off, and you do need to be prepared to negotiate your dates for leave. So you need to get the time off before you make the plans, rather than making plans and then expecting to get the time off. We're also a bit, at the moment, we're sort of trying to catch up with the fact that everybody's got 100, 150 days of leave because we couldn't take it for the last 2 years. So there's a lot of pressure for leave being taken at the moment. So the more adaptable and flexible you can be with leave dates, the better. On site, we have a bank, which is great. They can do transfers backwards and forwards. We have an app. I'm with a bank called Al Raji. I can do everything on my phone. I bank with NAB in Australia, and I just transfer backwards and forwards. Well, not backwards and forwards. I transfer over to Australia on my phone, and it arrives within 2 or 3 days. There are some bank accounts or some banks, I think particularly in New Zealand, that won't accept money, but I think CCM should be able to tell you who they are. I haven't heard too much about it lately, but definitely we can tell you which banks there are not a problem with if you when you get here. But it would be better actually to have that sorted out before you leave. A question just came up: is leave ever paid out if you cannot take the time? Yes, it is, and last year they allowed people to get paid out up to 60 days leave, but it's not an automatic entitlement. It has to be approved by the organisation. So yes, sometimes you can get paid out leave, and you can certainly take terminal leave if it comes to the end of your contract and you've got leave accrued that you haven't taken out. Then you can take that as terminal leave, just leave early and get paid that whilst you're away. Another question about, do staff maintain their bank accounts in their home countries? Yes, you absolutely should keep your bank accounts open at home. All I was saying was that you can transfer, you have to get paid into a Saudi account, and you can transfer from Saudi over to either Australia or New Zealand. There's a question about tax. I'll come back to that in a minute, but going back to the on-site facilities, we have a bank, we have internet available in most of the housing. We have a little supermarket on site. We have an electronic shop. Don't worry about trying to buy adapters before you leave, because the plugs are quite weird over here, so easier to get them when you're here. We also have a little gift shop. We have a jeweller's, which is bizarre that we have a jeweller's on site, but lots of people buy gold and diamonds at the jeweller's on site at the hospital. And all of the housing accommodation has really fantastic gym facilities. So the equipment is brand new and fantastic. They've managed to paint them and make them look really dated and old, but they are great facilities, and it costs 50 Riyals a month, which is nothing. It's like $20 a month for gym membership. We also have swimming pools in each of the accommodation blocks, and then we have these other facilities on site as well. So this is just again to show you where the female housing is in the multi-storey buildings down to the left-hand side. I'd say that about 50% of our Western nurses still live in housing on site, and the other 50% have chosen to take housing allowance and move out. But again, don't even think of doing that for the first couple of months, because just get settled before you start doing any of that. You can have female visitors in your accommodation. They're not supposed to stay, but occasionally if you have your mum or your sister or someone wants to come and visit, then yes, they can visit you, and I'm sure they could stay in your accommodation, but you can't be permanently housed there. And most of our housing is, most of it is single, but it's not guaranteed. So sometimes the accommodation will be shared accommodation when you first arrive, and you may have to go onto a waiting list to go into single accommodation. But if you are in shared accommodation, you have your own bedroom and bathroom, and then it's a shared living room and dining room. And the housing is free of charge. You don't pay anything at all for any services or utilities. And if anything stops working, then maintenance come out and do that. So this is just at the front of our accommodation. Every couple of months, I guess hopefully we'll get back to it, we have little pop-up events, and it's nice in the cooler weather. So we have really, really hot weather for about 5 months of the year, and then the rest of the year it's quite lovely. At the moment it's actually cold. I wore a coat to work this morning, and the great thing about Riyadh rather than Jeddah is we have no humidity. So I used to struggle in Jeddah. I find the humidity really oppressive, but even when it's 40 degrees in Riyadh and it gets up to 47, 48 for a couple of months, it's bone dry, so it's not too oppressive. Just some other pictures of the accommodation. This is our oldest accommodation now. So the really, really old accommodation has been handed back. You can see that whilst the furniture is sort of quite dated, it's very solid. They are looking to renovate, or not renovate, to replace all of the furniture in the buildings, but we don't get complaints about housing. We used to, and we very, very rarely get any complaints about housing now. So they're quite big. They're self-contained little units. You can see that people make them their own just by putting a few little bits and pieces in. This is the newer accommodation. It's again dark wood and about the same size, but they just just look a little bit different. This is the supermarket that's on site. We're surrounded by huge supermarkets, so this is kind of like a milk bar, and it's great if you just want to pick up some coffee and bread or something when you come off a night duty, so it's quite useful to have that on site. And then there's loads of coffee shops and little cafes within the hospital grounds. So the restrictions, when I first arrived, women couldn't drive. Women can drive now. I have my driver's license. To be honest, I choose not to drive in the city because they're crazy drivers. They drive really, really fast. They drive very aggressively. And so I choose just to jump in the back of the driver and be driven around rather than negotiating city traffic. But I could do if I wanted to. You can also hire a car from the hospital. So the social club has really, really good rates to hire a little car. So even if if you wanted to try it, certainly try it before you buy a car. But otherwise we have, we say we have a driver. So it just means you have a telephone number of someone who is a driver, and they're brilliant. They drive us around everywhere. So they're not mine particularly. They might have 100 nurses that use them. But you give them a call or send them a message and they'll pick you up and drop you off where you want to go. And if they're not available, they'll send someone to do that for you. So life's very easy when you get dropped at the front door and you send them a message to say, I'm ready to be picked up, and suddenly, miraculously, they're there at the front door to pick you up. We do get a little bit spoiled. The dress code has also changed. So when I first came, we had to wear abayas, these black gowns that go from your shoulder right down to the ground, and full length arms. But now you don't have to wear an abaya if you're not Muslim. A lot of people still choose to wear them, but they'll wear coloured abayas, or they'll just wear like a long cardigan over their normal clothes. The main thing is just that you need to be modest. So cover your elbows, cover your knees, and sort of avoid plunging necklines. But again, dress code has definitely changed, and we don't have to cover. So I'm useless at covering my hair. I can't tie a scarf to save my life, and it just constantly slips off. But in all the time I've been here, I've never been asked to cover my hair. I have been into the souks, and when I go into the souks, I kind of try to put a scarf on and tie it under my neck, only because people kind of look at you because you're unusual if you're not covered, and I don't want to offend anyone. But if I'm going to the supermarket or a shopping mall, I certainly don't cover. Alcohol is illegal in the country. I think there are some Muslim colleagues on the call today. Hate to say it, but there is alcohol everywhere in the country. It's just not spoken about. So socially, when you go somewhere, people drink and do everything else. We just don't speak about it. So it's kept behind walls. And most of your social life will either take place in embassies or compounds. And so it's not visible to the Saudis. The Saudis drink themselves, a lot of them, but they wouldn't talk about it, and we certainly wouldn't raise it with them as a question. So if stuff happens, it's just not spoken about. The other thing that's changed over the years is there were no cinemas when I first came to Saudi Arabia, and that has changed. So there's loads of cinemas. It's Riyadh season at the moment, which is this, I think it's 50 days of activities. So they've got international bands, and the Grand Prix is coming, and like all different sporting events are taking place. So that's it has changed a lot in the last 6 or 7 years, particularly over the last sort of 3 to 4 years. It's been very, very quick to see the change here in Saudi. Mixed gender group. So yeah, we're not supposed to be in the company of the opposite sex that we're not married to. I won't put Matilda on the spot and ask how she met her boyfriend here, so because that would not be fair. But people meet people here, and we certainly hang out with the opposite sex. You just do it carefully and respectfully. So if you're walking down the street, you're certainly not holding hands. If you're traveling somewhere, it's often a good idea to, like if you're going to an embassy event, travel with your girlfriends and meet your boyfriend, or meet the guys that you know where you're going, rather than traveling together. And certainly do not ever go out socially with a Saudi, because that's where it will cause big issues. Matilda, you're doing that saying you agree with me or don't agree with me? Yeah, okay. The reason being, yeah, you may fall in love with a Saudi and it may be brilliant forever after. And Sylvia, who was on earlier, is married to a Saudi gentleman, and he is divine. But the problem is that if you're young and you're in the company of a Saudi, male or female, sorry, of the opposite sex, you are going to attract attention, because, and the Saudi will get in trouble. You won't, but the Saudi will get in trouble. So it's better if you just don't come here thinking I'll meet a Saudi and date a Saudi. Best think the opposite way, that you won't. Certainly have friends, but even going out for dinner with a Saudi male, for example, is going to set yourselves up and them for potential issues. Because if anyone's going to have an issue with anything, they'll have an issue where it's a Saudi and a non-Saudi. We had a lovely young female nurse who went out with one of our Saudi male nurses. They were just going out for dinner, and he ended up getting, you know, big trouble. So it's just sort of stay clear of that. And Matilda's reaction was interesting to see, but I can't stress that highly enough. So social life, there is loads to do. There's most people say I've never been as socially active in my entire life. The embassies and compounds were closed during COVID. They're just starting to open up again. So over the next month, there's more events than you could poke a stick at. So there's Christmas parties and formal events, and people end up having to buy gowns for formal events at the embassies and stuff. It's just can be kind of overwhelming what you can do here. But again, it's typically not spoken about. It happens behind closed doors. You can also get out to the desert. The desert is beautiful, and there's great trips that are organised through the social club, or just lots of groups online and sort of WhatsApp groups. Well, they'll go out in four-wheel drives and go camping in the desert. There's also all kinds of sporting events. The Gaelic football's huge here. Hockey is big as well. And so if you don't, the key thing I think with social life is every time that if you're asked to do anything when you first arrive, accept the invitation. Even if you're not sure that it's really something that you're going to do forevermore, make sure that you accept the invitation and go along, because next month there'll be more new arrivals and you might not get asked again. So you never have to go again if you didn't like what it was that you did that first time. But it is important to accept invitations, because remember that each month new people arrive, and so kind of if you don't join in to begin with, you might really get left behind, and it can be a lonely place if you don't have friends. So do make sure that you make an effort to join in when you arrive. Just some pictures of the country. This is in the diplomatic quarter, which is about 15 minutes away from the hospital. It's a lovely area with cafes and restaurants, and there's a big running track, walking track around the outside. This is the Red Sea. I just like go diving and scuba diving. This is down on the Faroe Islands, which are on the west coast. So even though we're a desert country, obviously there's a huge coastline as well. But you don't see people, unfortunately, you don't swim very often here, particularly in Riyadh, unless you go out to the compounds and there are swimming pools there. The desert, as I said, is just beautiful. The northwest, there's a lot of tourism promotion going on for Saudi Arabia at the moment, and it's based in this the northwest region more than anywhere else, because they've just got this incredible old civilization that they have started to try to bring tourists to, called Alula. So if you've been to Jordan, or if you've heard of Petra, it's very, very similar. And this is the landscape. It's just magnificent. So one of the great things about COVID was being locked in the country was you really got to see the country. And normally I'd sort of be rushing off at the weekends or taking leave and going off and flying around the world. But because we weren't able to travel, really got to have a look around the country. This is called the Edge of the World. It's about an hour's drive from Riyadh. It's a lovely place to go out and camp. This is the place that I was saying over in the northwest called Medina and Salah, and it's like Petra. It's the same people that built Petra, and obviously camels everywhere. Oh, that was really cool. Christmas Day, I was stuck here last year, so we drove to this rock. Look at this; it's naturally split. Absolutely phenomenal. It took quite a long time to find it, but it's definitely worth it. So I camped out in the desert on Christmas Day last year. You don't see very many old buildings either, but you'll see lots of camels, and there's lots of stuff that you can do. So it's definitely worth getting out and having a look around. Back to when the travel and the flight restrictions are lifted completely, it's very easy to get away for the weekends. Big international airport in Riyadh, so there's many flights a day to the to UAE, to Dubai, to Abu Dhabi, to Bahrain, to Jeddah. It's only 2 hours to places like Cairo, Beirut, and Jordan. 4 hours you can be in India, Zanzibar, Africa. 5 hours you're kind of into the Mediterranean, so Greece and Italy, Cyprus. And then 7 hours to get further north in Europe. So you actually can get away for, like, if you have a 3-day weekend, it's plenty of time to get away. And as Sylvia said before she left, you can see, you really can make the most of it. And I think that's one of the things that Australian and New Zealanders often hope to be able to do, is travel when they get here. There was one nurse we had here, and I think she went to 50 countries while she was here. and she did her master's as well. And she was only here for like 3 or 4 years. So I guess it's just such a long way to travel from Australia and New Zealand, right? So the important bit, go back to that figure that I said, who saved some money last year. Matilda put her hand up and said that she had, but she was cheating because she was in Saudi Arabia. Nobody else told me what they managed to save. So this is where that point, where we come back to. Each year you'll get 54 days of annual leave. However, if you're working as a nurse and you're working 12-hour shifts, you hardly use your leave, because if you cover with the way that you take your time off, you can get big chunks of time off with only taking 1 or 2 days of annual leave. You're able to save a lot of money because everything is provided free of charge. So your accommodation and your utilities, it's completely free of charge. If you choose to live out, if you choose to take advantage of the living out allowance, it should cover well, it depends where you choose to rent, but it should cover the cost of your accommodation, plus it will cover your utilities. But it depends how much you choose to spend. So if you spend your full whack on your rent, obviously then you're not going to have your utilities covered. So the allowance is for you to do with as you want, but you can't come back and say, oh, I need more money to pay for my electricity, for example. It's a relatively low cost of living because, unlike places like Abu Dhabi and Dubai, if we go out to eat, we're just going out to eat. You're not throwing in drinks and a bottle of wine, and so the cost of sort of going out is minimised because it's only the food that you're going out to. Dubai is pretty hard to save money because there's a lot going on, but Saudi, most of our social stuff is actually relatively inexpensive social. So it's either hanging out at compounds or going to events at the embassies, which will be all inclusive. You also get free healthcare and emergency dental care. I managed to break my arm earlier this year, and so I was a patient at the hospital, and they were really, I can't complain with the treatment at all. It was really quite overwhelming to be treated as a patient and see just how they throw everything at you. They certainly don't hold back because you're an employee. So lots of people, I can see questions about tax. I'm not a tax agent, so I can't tell you what your setup in Australia is. But having been here for 7 years, I don't pay tax in Australia. I do a tax return every year, but I don't have to declare my salary and pay tax on my salary in Australia. That's my circumstances. So just for transparency, I have a house that I rent out in Australia. I pay tax on the interest. I pay tax on any income that I generate from the house, but I don't pay any tax on the income from Saudi Arabia. And I send my money back to Australia, but I send it back in chunks less than $10,000. If you send money back and it's less than $10,000 when it arrives into Australia, it doesn't get reported through to the tax office. But if you send $10,000, it will get reported through to the tax office. So CCM may be able to give you a little bit of advice about tax, but they're not tax agents either. It's always worth just having a quick chat to make sure that you set yourself up correctly so that you don't find yourself having to pay tax. But as I said, I've been here for 7 years. I've not known anyone had to pay tax. You'll also, depending on the contract that you sign, you may get a sign-on bonus, or you will get a sign-on bonus when you arrive. Just be careful, if you don't complete your contract, they will take back what you've been paid from your last salary. You may or may not get a specialty premium, which will depend on the area that you work in, but I'm not going to include specialty premiums into any calculations when we talk about savings potential, because they're not guaranteed. They're only paid per calendar year from January to December, and each year they're reevaluated. So if you get them, take it as a bonus. If you don't get them, you're not making a decision to come to Saudi Arabia based on that amount of money. You also get a year-end bonus. So you don't get superannuation paid when you're in Saudi, but when you leave, you get a severance pay will include half a month's salary for each year up to 4 years that you're with us. And if you stay longer than 4 years, that goes up to 1 month per year. And that's basically what you can put into your superannuation fund when you get back, or you can continue to contribute while you're away. And, you know, again, you can work out how you want to do that. But just so that you're aware, we don't pay into a superannuation fund. You also get a flight to and from your point of contact. So in your first year, you get a flight here, and your return ticket is the ticket that will take you home at the end of your contract. But every other year, you get a recontracting ticket, and you can take that to fly back to Australia, or you can cash it in and take the value to fly somewhere else. But just so that you're aware, it's a ticket. The first year, your ticket is the ticket here and the ticket home. And then each year you get a ticket to use for vacation. So we're going to have a look at salary and how much you can expect to earn and save. And I'm sure if you've looked through this already, you're shocked and thinking that's not very much money. I get paid more than that where I am at the moment. So just to be clear, this salary that I've put up is as if you only have 2 years of experience and nothing more. So I can't put up everybody's salary separately. So just to make it as straightforward as possible, if you only had 2 years of experience, this would be the calculation for you. If you have more years of experience, your base salary will go up, and everything goes up with the fact that your base salary has gone up. So does anybody have just 2 years of experience who's on the call today? No? Anybody have 3 years of experience? No? Okay. So typically when I show it, it's about comparable to Australia for their first 2 years of experience. What we're going to look at is if you came for 1 year, your monthly basic salary would be this amount, 14,180 Saudi riyals, which on today's exchange rate is these amounts. So 5,200 Australian and 5,400 New Zealand dollars. If you've got 10 years of experience, your salary is going to be considerably more. You may or may not get a specialty premium, but as I said, we don't know what that amount would be, and it's not guaranteed. So I'm not going to include it in any calculations. But again, if you come for 1 year, at the end of 1 year, you will be paid 15 days of basic salary, so half a month of basic salary as severance when you leave. So this is half a month's salary. So in total, if you came for 12 months, you would get 12.5 months salary. Yeah, that 12.5 months equals these amounts in Australian dollars and New Zealand dollars. And if we look at savings potential, there, if we say that you spend 2,500 Saudi riyals a month, why that figure? Well, I kind of worked out how much I spend a month and then added a bit more because I don't typically go out to eat very often. But 2,500 riyals, or this amount in dollars, is actually more than enough for internet and food and taxis to take me to the supermarket, and occasionally I get a taxi to work. I haven't included any overtime. I haven't included a specialty premium, but I have included the severance pay. So this amount was what we looked at on the last screen. And now we're going to take away 12 times this amount. So this is how much we're going to spend in a month, in a year. Yeah. This is how much you can save in 1 year. Now, are you going to save all of that in 1 year? Chances are you're probably not, because if you did that, you're not really traveling, you're not having any time away, you're not buying yourself a new handbag, which everybody seems to do when they get here. And they don't just buy any old handbags. Suddenly everyone has Gucci and Louis Vuitton handbags. But this shows what you could save. So if you blew half of it, or if you spent $26,000 on stuff, you could still save $30,000 in a year. Nobody's really reacting, or I can't see any faces. But Matilda, you're smiling because you did it, yeah? You did manage to save some money. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So if we go backwards, if you came on a 2-year contract, the difference with a 2-year contract is that we give you an annual bonus. So same thing, looking in this top right-hand screen, this is your same basic salary. But in 2 years, we're also going to give you in your second year and every other year afterwards, we give you a recontracting or an annual bonus. So you get an extra month's salary just for recontracting. Also, if you come for 2 years and you left after 2 years, you would get 2 half months of severance pay because you get half per year. They're here for 2 years, so you get 1 month's extra salary. So in 24 months, you would actually get 26 months of salary. So you get your 24 months salary, you get 2 half months of severance pay, plus you get that annual bonus. So this now equals these amounts, $140,000 and $146,000. And if we look at that over 2 years and we take away this same amount, so we're now doubling it to 60,000 riyals of your spending money, of just your living costs, of your food and your internet. These are the savings potentials for 2 years. And it's what we call the golden handcuffs, because once you've come and you started to, you may not be earning more than you earn in Australia and New Zealand, but you can save money here that you can't save at home. And that's why once you've been here for a while, it's hard to not have the ability to save money again, because life's expensive at home. So what happens from here? Hopefully you're interested. Hopefully I haven't put you off. If you are interested, we go ahead with an interview. We interview via Teams meeting, so the same way that we're doing this. There is quite a process to get here. And Matilda, when you came over before, did it take you about 6 months to get here?
Yeah, it took a little bit longer actually.
Yeah. Minimum of 6 months. It can often take closer to sort of 8, 9 months. But do follow your instructions provided by CCM, because they know what you need to do and when you need to do it. And it's difficult to make it happen a whole lot quicker. Locums can be processed quicker because you don't have to go through all the licensing business, but it does take a while. And of course, Matilda may have got caught up in the whole COVID thing as well, where everything just took so much longer to get anywhere. You will have to have a medical, and it's a pretty comprehensive medical. You also into Arabic says the same thing. And then your visa process, CCM will actually guide you through that process. But in order to have the visa application, you have to have a visa medical. So we try to get you to have the medical done at one time that will suffice for both the hospital for us to do pre-employment clearance and your visa medical. Some things will not be cleared. So if you do have any medical conditions, please make sure that you speak to CCM early on, because there'd be nothing worse than going through the whole process to find out when you declare something in a medical that you're not going to be processed because you won't be cleared on medical grounds. The other thing is some things are not available in Saudi Arabia. So if you are on medication that is not really standard medication, make sure that you disclose that and we can check whether it's available for you. You can't get the contraceptive pill here, so you will need to bring that with you if you need it, want it. You also can't buy tampons in Saudi, so people tend to bring those with them when they come. A year's supply in your case is fantastic. Yes, Matilda?
I would advise you can order tampons off Amazon.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. You can have, rather than having your suitcase full of tampons when you come over, you can have stuff delivered. You may get hit for import tax when it arrives, but it's just one of those things. And very occasionally, a shop will stock them and the word will go out and they'll be sold in 2 minutes. So a good idea to at least bring supply with you. So traveling to Saudi, again, all of those arrangements are made through CCM, and then we will be in contact with you when we know that you're arriving. So when we get flight details confirmed, we reach out to you via WhatsApp, and we'll guide you from the minute you get to the airport. So say if you're flying from Melbourne, send us a message when you get to Melbourne Airport. Okay, I've checked in, and we will get you to your accommodation from there. So we'll say safe travels, and when you get there, we'll get you to send us a message and we say, okay, go and do this, and there's a transport's waiting for you here, and they'll have your key to your accommodation, and then we'll chat to you sort of while you're on the bus going to your accommodation. And when we know you're in your accommodation, we'll say, okay, good night, see you in the morning, and we'll see you the next day. So although we can't come out to the airport to meet you as we used to, we do, we're on the end of the phone the whole way. Okay, so hopefully that has answered a lot of the questions that may have popped into your head. But if not, I can see there are a few questions coming up. Julia said Hegra. She's right. Hegra is also known as Medina and Salah, and it's the beautiful area up near Petra. They're the Nabateans that developed it, and you have to go. Alula is one of my favourite places in Saudi Arabia. Tax-free we've spoken about, and can you tell us about RNs working in ORs in relation to shift hours and rosters? Yeah, so the best thing to do is it depends on the specialty of OR that you are. So it will, when you, if you decide to be interviewed, what I can say is you need to anticipate that you would either work 12-hour shifts or more business hours, but the business hours, sorry, when I say business hours, I mean the shifts will be split over 5 days. But we've got lots of staggered times for shift patterns because we're trying to extend the hours that the ORs run because we're still trying to catch up with the COVID backlog. So anything to do with particular shift patterns for OR, endoscopy and hemo, it's probably better to speak to the people when you're interviewed, and they'll be able to give you very specific information. Okay, so questions? Or is everyone just tired and had enough? So Ginny, what about senior nursing role? I work in quality, what opportunities? Tricky. So we do have a nursing quality department. We're certainly happy to have a look at your resume, and but yeah, they're not nearly as, they don't come up as frequently as they may at home, because obviously we need to try to focus on Saudiization, so getting Saudis who are able to lead forward with those positions. We're here as guests and we're here for a limited period of time, so we are here to try and develop and support the Saudi nationals in their career development. But yeah, we do have positions from time to time, so certainly we're putting your resume forward and we'll see what we can do. Somebody has asked about Muslim nurses. Is there an opportunity to perform Hajj? Absolutely, and Muslims work Muslim hours during Ramadan as well. So yeah, that's certainly an opportunity to go over to Medina. Is there a cutoff age? There kind of is, which is 56, I think. It is being reviewed, but 56 at the moment. And I can see Julia is typing, but I can't see her. No, she's stopped. So if anyone has any questions, if you want to put your hand up or just call out, as I said, I'm very, very happy. I think that's answered all of the questions that were written. Let me put that down. Did anybody have a question that I haven't answered? I've been trying to do them as we go through. Somebody said, don't forget the Kiwis. Did I forget the Kiwis? Sorry, I tried to keep New Zealand, say Australia and New Zealand each time, so I do apologise. Yeah, I think that's all of the questions asked. So over to you guys. Do you have anything you'd like to ask that you have? No, Matilda, you can please speak up. Truthful or not? Or how well do you think I've reflected what you experienced here?
I think you reflected it quite well. I think Jeddah is quite different to Riyadh. Yeah. In lots of ways, especially the diversity in staff. And I went over in January last year and was locked down pretty soon after that. So, and I got back in May this year or June. So my experience was definitely unique.
You had a tough one.
Anyway, so I mean, I met someone while I was over there, and I'm going back to Riyadh mostly for that reason for just a little while. But I think that it's still an incredible experience. And I feel like certain types of people go to Saudi and appreciate it for what it is. And you meet people with like-minded people.
Yeah, so and that's the key thing. I think the key thing is they used to say that people came to Saudi because they were running away from something. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I don't think I was running away from anything. It just seemed like, oh, go and give it a go. If I hate it, I can come home. It's not the end of the world. They can't turn me into a frog. But I'm still here 7 years later. And most people definitely only coming for 1 year, maximum 2. But the average length of stay for Western nurses is over 4 years. So something happens. The other thing is, if people leave and then come back, yeah, it's tough. Matilda probably had the toughest because she wasn't able to travel. Everything was locked down. We were on curfew for, I know Australia and New Zealand's had it longer than anyone else now, but we shut down on the 13th of March. And you can go anywhere. The only place we were allowed to do was go to and from work, and we had to have a paper permit, and the security would stop us. So it was weird. You had a tough time to be here, but the people are really kind. One of the biggest things is when Arabic is spoken, it often sounds like people are arguing or fighting. But often they could just be saying, "Oh, it's a lovely day. The sky's blue, sun's shining." But because of the way that they're speaking Arabic, it can be kind of you feel tense and stressed straight away. And so it is good to kind of be aware of that and be aware that just if you can come with the right attitude of, this is just an adventure. Let's see what it's going to be. Please don't come thinking that it is going to be like work at home. It's not. Nothing is the same. But does that mean it's wrong? It doesn't mean it's wrong. I'll be honest, I think nursing or the quality of care is very different to home, but we have a marvellous health system in Australia and New Zealand. So and as I said at the beginning, it's a third world country with gold layered over, and you only have to scratch a little bit and suddenly you're not in that third world, you're in a third world country. But do I love it? I do. Bizarrely, I love it. I think it's mad and chaotic, and I really like it. And so if you're up for an adventure, then it's definitely a place to come. And hey, you can save some money. You can definitely save some money.
Yeah, definitely.
So everyone seems to be very quiet, which hopefully that just means I've answered your questions as they've come up or they've popped into your head. So go ahead. Matilda.
Can I just ask, did you say you saw my name somewhere?
In an email. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
No, an email came through, I think, saying that you'd like to be considered, or could you join because all of your resumes come through to me, and then I organise the interview.
I was just wondering
I've
about
done
emergency.
Tilda.
Okay.
And Ginny, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a little bit more about promotion opportunities. If you come and start in one role, is it possible to move into other roles or be promoted into something more senior as you go along, and especially if you're planning on staying a bit longer?
Yeah, it certainly is. You have to complete your initial contract. If you come on a 2-year contract, you have to complete 2 years to be eligible to apply for promotion. The only thing I would say is the promotion policy is currently not great. So if you were hired into a higher grade position, you'd be hired in on a higher salary. But if you are promoted internally, your salary doesn't necessarily jump up to what it would have been if you had been hired in, because the promotion policy is that you get paid one grade plus 1 step higher. So it is something that if you are looking for a senior position, in some respects, it's better to wait for the senior position than come in as staff nurse and think, oh, well, I'll get promoted in 2 years and then I'll earn this kind of money, because that isn't the case. It's the same for everybody here. It's the same for Saudis as well as expats. That may change in the future, but at the moment, our promotion policy is not fantastic. You can be eligible for promotion, but your salary doesn't necessarily jump to what you'd think it would be.
Okay. I was also going to ask you about what the typical sort of age range for Western nurses are in Riyadh. So I'm in my 40s and my kids are all grown up. 50s. I'm looking for kind of a later in life, are we? I'm wondering, are there many people like me? Is it mostly just young graduates?
I'll be your friend.
No, it's kind of both. So it's there's the young nurses before they settle down with a mortgage and a dog and a partner. And then and coming for that sort of that period of time. And then there's the other where, okay, kids are growing up now, I can actually do something that perhaps I haven't been able to do or not wanted to do while the kids are growing up. So yes, there are both groups. The other thing is that your social group is not limited to only other nurses. There's so many other expatriate professionals here, teachers, engineers, bankers, all sorts. So there's great social.
I suppose you meet people in embassies and.
Yeah, well, and there's sort of social networking kind of like there's things called internations, and there's walking groups and all sorts of things where you can meet people from all around the world, and which is fantastic because it's so, you know, it really is very diverse. You'll meet people from the Americas, from South America, from Europe, from, you know, back home, from Ireland, from the UK. So don't worry that your social group is going to be limited to the hospital. If anything, I'd say get out of the hospital, because when you're in the hospital, you're living, working, eating, sleeping, breathing with the same people. That's a pressure cooker. So it's good to be able to just leave it behind. I don't live in, I live on the DQ. So, and social, I'm not, like, I'm quite happy in my own company, but my social group are not nurses. They're kind of everything else. And that's not because I don't like nurses, but I'm that older, I'm in my 50s. And so I tend to hang out with people that are the same sort of age group, you know, from 40s to 60s, rather than young people that want to go out partying every night.
I can share a bit as well. Like when I was there, I was a grade 4 nurse. So I was like 10 to the younger group, but then I've got friends still younger than me, while I've got friends at their 50s as well. And then they also got like some other expats, they join us like from parties, from friends of friends, and then you even meet like CEO of like big companies, and you never think that you will meet those people in your nursing life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is too, if you, for example, there's I'm on a couple of desert lovers, and they go out 4-wheel driving and then camp out in the desert, and they're just every type of person, nationality, profession, occupation. It's just really cool to go and sit around a campfire and shoot the breeze. And would you hang out with them at home? You probably not get the opportunity to meet them because they're just such just a diverse group. So yeah, I don't think you need to be worried about it, as long as you're willing to kind of put yourself out there and make the effort. If you think everyone has to come to you, because we are. So right at the beginning, I said my husband was in the army, and every year we used to move, and I often felt that people, because they knew you were an army wife, they kind of wouldn't invest in their time in you because they knew that next year you'd be leaving anyway. And so because of that, you have to flip it around and say, okay, I'll put myself out there, and you know what, if it doesn't work, hey, I just don't go again. But there's certainly lots of opportunity to do lots of stuff and meet lots of people if you're prepared to sort of put yourself forward.
Yeah, I agree. You'll definitely make friends, Ginny.
That's vote of confidence. Thank you.
Yeah, you will.
One more question about the accommodation. You were saying that you can transition from the on-site accommodation to the compounds, and to how easily does that accommodation allowance translate into a reasonable cost covering in compound life?
Not to a compound. Compound it wouldn't cover. Compounds. It's like saying, can I buy an apartment in Melbourne for $400,000? And people just laugh at you. It's, you know, the cost has just gone crazy here. But what most people do is they get an apartment that is kind of 10, 15 minutes drive outside of the hospital. They get a little car. And to be honest, most people do it. Some people do it because, for example, actually, one thing to say is don't do it because you've got a boyfriend and you want to live with your boyfriend, because that's a bit dangerous. You don't want to be doing that, because if you're not married, you shouldn't be. So Matilda would have already thought about how she's going to handle that. But to live in a compound, there will be compounds that you can live in, but for the amount that you will be spending, you'd probably prefer to be in a nice little apartment block in the community. And I live in the diplomatic quarter now, but I used to live in the community on a street up with Sylvia when she was on earlier, and we used to walk to work from there. We used to walk to work you know, it would be dark in the morning and I'd walk home at 11 o'clock at night sometimes, and never an issue. So it wasn't an issue security wise, but I wanted somewhere that I didn't have to get in a car and drive to be able to go walking. So I live where I can go walking in the evenings because that's what I like to do. And yeah, absolutely. Most of the girls do it, who do it, tell us that they're actually able to save a little bit of money by doing it. I think the housing allowance is, oh, sorry, off the top of my head, I don't know, but I think it's about 7,000 a month, which is, and the girls from CCM would have seen it on somebody's offer that's come through, and we'll certainly be able to detail that in your, when you get an offer, but you could certainly find somewhere nice to live.
It's basically based on your basic salary. It's 25% of your basic salary usually.
Okay. Fantastic. So there you go.
Yep.
Matilda, go ahead.
With regards to what you just said about moving out of accommodation and that organisation, any advice? In my situation?
So I did notice that we had some Muslim colleagues on the call, so I don't want to offend anyone, and that's very much kind of the way that we need to live here. So people definitely do it. So if two of you are getting a housing allowance, you could either go into a compound where it's not going to be an issue, where there's kind of a Western compound, but whether or not the cost would cover you, because both of you are going to have allowance for that. Otherwise, you just have to, it's the neighbours, because all it needs is for a neighbour to report you, or you upset a neighbour, or someone sees you coming and going, you're putting yourself at risk. So but I know people do it, and I know I could quietly put you in contact with some people that I know live with their partners, and maybe better to ask them, because I don't live with a partner, so it's probably better that I don't try to give you information that's incorrect, but I can certainly put you in contact and you can have a discreet conversation with them.
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
Kate, there's just been a couple more questions in the chat whilst we've been talking. Are you happy to have a look at those?
Sure. So I saw the age restriction. Tina saying she's not a spring chicken. Neither am I, my dear, but that's okay. Can I ask about married partners? Okay, so if you are male, you can bring your partner on your Agama. If you are female, it's Saudi Arabia, you can't. They can come on a visit visa, they can come and go. So my husband has been here twice, and he stayed here for 6 months twice, but he came on a year-long tourist visa, which meant that every 60 days or 90 days he had to leave the country and then come back again, but they wouldn't be able to reside officially. They would be on a tourist visa. So Cassie, hopefully that answers your question. Is it Bill Kisu? I'm not quite sure how to say your name. It's a lovely name, but I'm not sure that I'm saying that correctly. What about if you choose to come for a short contract? So our only options are to come for a 3-month locum, which you can extend for another 3 months. So you'd be here for a total of 6 months. But you can't come and go on that visa. You have to stay in the kingdom for that period of 6 months or 3 months. Other than that, it really is a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract. And then, and that will affect the sign-on bonus. So the one thing I didn't talk about in the presentation is if you come for 1 year, you get $2,500 US as a sign-on bonus. And if you come for a 2-year contract, it's $5,000 US for a sign-on bonus. If you leave before you complete your contract, they can take what you have been paid back from your sign-on bonus, because it is for the completion of the contract that you send. Sorry, I've got this horrible squeal in my ear. I don't know if everyone else has got that as well. And sign-on bonus to your contract. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. So Bill Kasu, hopefully that answers your question about short contracts. 3 months, which you can extend to 6 months, or come on a 1 or a 2-year contract, and then you recontract each year for another year. That's what I was going to say. Okay. I think that's all the questions, isn't it, Maddie? Ah, phlebotomist. Is there a employment pathway for a phlebotomist? We don't employ phlebotomists. If you are a nurse, we don't employ phlebotomists. But if you are a nurse, then we could look at you and see where you might be able to be employed. But we don't have a phlebotomy department as such. Clinical nurse specialist, 5 years experience. Does that? Yeah, I think we've answered most of these, have we?
Yeah, I think we have now, just looking through them.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Kate.
You're very welcome. I'm sorry it always goes longer than I'm supposed to go for. Just my final words would be, it's chaotic, it's madness, it's hard work, but incredibly rewarding. I love it here. I have days where I think, what am I doing? And why am I still here? But that moment passes so quickly. I think it is, if you have an opportunity to do it, grasp it with both hands. If you are someone who feels that what I've said is kind of interesting and exciting, if you're a bit worried by what I've said, I've tried to be honest. And so, have a serious think about whether we're actually right for, whether it's right for you or not, because it's a tough gig, but it can be super, super rewarding. Okay, so hopefully you will at least throw your hat in the ring, have an interview. If you're interviewed by the head nurse or the program director. So our program directors look after a service. So for example, all the medical surgical units are under one, all the perioperative services under another, and they will interview you. It's not super, super formal interviews. So of course we presented and ready for that to happen, just in case they decide to go formal on the day. But they really wanted to see the type of person you are. So the more relaxed you can be, the more smiley you can be, even if you know 1 or 2 words of Arabic to say hello, salam alaikum, they'll love it, because my Arabic is horrible even after 7 years, but they love it. Even if you make a horrible mistake, they just, you've given it a go. So most of the interviewers, we try to do them during our afternoon. We'll try to do them late morning for you guys, but they can be late in your day. So please get your resumes through to us. I have seen a couple of questions. Send your resumes through to CCM. We'll try and get you interviewed next week or the week after. And if we can get you interviewed next week, it'd be really good, because we've got a special project where we're going to get the offers created the following week, because you can wait quite a while to get offers created. So if we can get you interviewed in the next week, by Tuesday week at Monday week at the latest, we can possibly even get a letter of offer out to you within a day or 2, which would be great for you rather than having to wait. Remember, when you see the salaries, remember what I said, they could be lower than you're earning where you are, but just think about the amount that you can save, and it does make a difference. So really, really lovely. Thank you to everyone who asked a question. For those of you who didn't, hopefully I answered what was going in and out of your head. If anything does pop up, please let the girls at CCM know, and sorry, Matt's there as well, I know, and I keep saying girls, but just ask any questions of those and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And thank you so much for all of your time. It's been really, really lovely to see you all.